Okay, so let's get started. Okay, this is the 2024 Democratic Republic of the Congo. Okay, coup attempt, and I heard about this like in the news. I heard that there was like an American or something. There were Americans involved in it. But I didn't really get a chance to really do a lot of research into it. So that's gonna be the purpose of this video here today. So we're gonna go ahead and get it started off. This is Wikipedia, according to Wikipedia. Okay, 2024 Democratic Republic of the Congo coup attempt. On May 19, 2024, an attempted coup d'état took place in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, targeting President Felix Tshisekedi and his economy minister Vital Kamerhe. The assailants attacked both the Palais de la Nation and Kamerhe's residence. They were heavily armed and put up an intense fight at the Kamerhe home. At least one shell from the fighting detonated in the nearby capital of the Republic of the Congo, Brazzaville, causing several injuries. Okay. Okay. The coup attempt was foiled quickly by security forces. Okay, the orchestrator of the coup was Christian Malanga, a Congolese native who lives in the United States as a political asylee. Malanga founded the U.S. registered party, the United Congolese Party, in 2010. Then in 2017, in Belgium, he proclaimed himself head of the new Zaire government in exile. Um, Referring to himself as president, he was killed during the attempted coup. His son and two other American nationals were captured, tried, and sentenced to death as part of a group of more than 50 people, but were repatriated to the United States after their sentences were commuted to life imprisonment by President uh, Tshisekedi. Okay, so as a background, the coup attempt occurred amid a political crisis that gripped President Felix Tshisekedi's ruling party. The crisis revolved around an election for the leadership of parliament, initially slated for May 18, 2024, but subsequently deferred. One of the targeted politicians um, was an ally of Tshisekedi, economy minister Vital Kamerhe, who was running the presidency of the National Assembly. Okay, events. Fighting was reported in the capital, Kinshasa, in the early hours of May 19th, coinciding with Pentecost Sunday. At approximately 04:30, clashes between men wearing camouflage fatigues holding assault rifles and the security forces were reported near the Palais du Peuple, which the assailants managed to enter. 20 others attacked Vital Kamerhe's residence at Taheshi Boulevard in the Gombe neighborhood, but were foiled by his security guards. Okay, gunfire was also reported near the Palais de la Nation, with bullet casings, bloodstains, and shattered glass being seen at its entrance. Okay. The attackers displayed flags of Zaire, as the country was known during the dictatorship of Mobutu. Some of the attackers also wore patches with the U.S. flag. They declared that they wished to see a regime change. Um, Images circulating on social networks showed men in military fatigues, armed with AK-47s, and chanting Tshisekedi out in English. Malanga appeared on a live stream video on his Facebook page depicting him at the entrance of the Palais de la Nation, flanked by men wearing camouflage with the Zairian flag. Malanga shouted, "Felix, you're out. We are coming for you." Okay. The Congolese army was subsequently deployed in Kinshasa, along with armored vehicles. Roadblocks were installed near the Palais de Peuple and other parts of the capital. Okay. Army spokesman Brigadier General Sylvain Ekenji said at a media briefing later that Malenga was killed after resisting arrest by the Republican Guard during the fighting at the Palais de la Nation. Malenga's Utah-born son, Marcel Malenga, age 21, was also arrested by the Congolese army. At least 50 people, including 3 U.S. nationals, were arrested in connection with the coup attempt. Some of them were also reported to be carrying Canadian passports. Okay. Casualties. 2 police officers who were guarding Kamari's residence were killed during the coup attempt, as were 4 attackers, including their leader, Christian Malenga. Okay. Several people were injured after a shell fired from the Kanasha flew across the Congo River and landed on a neighborhood of Brazzaville, the neighboring capital of the Republic of the Congo. Okay. Investigation. This report said the attackers were members of the Congolese military before it was found that they were linked to Christian Malenga. Malenga moved from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the United States in the late 1990s and worked as a car salesman in Utah before returning to the DRC to serve as an army officer. He went into exile in 2012 after a coup attempt in the DRC the previous year. While in exile, he declared himself president of New Zaire and described himself as the president of the United Congolese Party, which we refer to as an opposition political party in exile. A DRC army spokesman initially described Malenga as a naturalized U.S. citizen, but the U.S. Department of State stated that there was no indication Malenga had acquired U.S. citizenship. Kenji said that the army had apprehended a naturalized British subject whom he described as the second in command of the group. His name has not been revealed. The UK Foreign Office said it was aware of the reports a British national was being held and was in contact with Congolese authorities. Okay. Apart from Marcel Malenga, 2 U.S. nationals were also captured during the coup. The second national was identified as Benjamin Ruben Zalman Poulon, a business associate of Malenga. Zalman Poulon graduated from the University of Colorado and attended business administration classes at Georgetown University. In 2015, Zalman Poulon pleaded guilty to drug trafficking. Wow, okay. Alright. Zalman Poulon became a business associate of Malenga through a gold mining company that was set up in Mozambique in 2022, according to an official journal published by Mozambique's government and a report by Africa Intelligence newsletter. Okay, also arrested was Tyler Thompson, originally was identified as Tyler Thompson, spelled Thomson, a 21-year-old friend and former high school football teammate of Marcel Malenga. Okay. Thompson's family expressed shock at his alleged involvement, saying that he was vacationing in Africa with some family and friends and had no prior political activity. They added that the DRC was not part of his stated itinerary. Okay. Another American, a 22-year-old FedEx worker and former high school football teammate of Thompson, and Marcel Malenga said that Marcel had offered him $50,000 to $100,000 to act as a security guard for his father for 4 months in the DRC. The man who lives in Utah declined the offer because Marcel was vague on the details of the proposed job. Other colleagues of Marcel said that he had made various propositions to entice them to go with him to the DRC, describing the opportunity at various points as a family vacation or as a service project to build wells in impoverished communities. Okay. Reactions. The coup attempt lasted 3 hours, after which the army declared that it had been foiled and was under control. The U.S. Embassy issued warnings of caution following the clashes, with Ambassador Lucy Tamlin saying that they were cooperating with Congolese authorities in the investigation and pledging to hold accountable any American citizen involved. On June 3rd, the embassy said the Congolese authorities had not given them details or allowed access to the American nationals in prison for their involvement in the coup attempt. The French embassy warned against traveling to Gombe. Okay. The head of the African Union, Commission Musi Faki, strongly condemned the attempted coup and welcomed its suppression by the Congolese security forces. Okay, trials. Okay, so it gets even better with the trials. So we'll read about the trials now. See how that went. Okay, but the whole thing just seems crazy. Like the whole thing just seems like it's really crazy. Coup attempt just seemed like this wild idea. I mean, this man was in exile, calling himself the president of New Zaire, and I mean, who agreed to make him president? Like, you know what I mean? I mean, what kind of mind state you got to be in to be, walking around calling yourself the president of a country where you haven't been elected? So it kind of shows the mindset of this guy. Then of course, he had his son involved with him, and his son was trying to get people he went to high school with to get involved in this. And I believe that there's this gentleman that was with them that his son also knew that was involved in the. He had pled guilty to drug trafficking, and he was over there trying to get involved in the mining industry. So this whole thing looks like a mess, man. This looks like a mess. So we'll talk about the trials. Okay. 53 people were formally charged with various offenses related to the coup, such as terrorism, murder, and criminal association, some of which are capital offenses after Christian Malenga and another deceased person were removed from the list. A televised court-martial for the remaining 51 suspects, including Marcel Malenga, Benjamin Rubin, Zalman Poulon, and Tyler Thompson, began at the Ndolo military prison in Kinshasa on June 7th. During the course of the trial, Marcel Malenga and Zalman Poulon said that they had been coerced by Christian Malenga to participate in the coup, adding that the latter had threatened to kill them. Okay, so this guy's saying his own dad coerced them into the coup and was threatening to kill him. Okay, Human Rights Watch criticized the inclusion of Jean-Jacques Wando, a Belgian Congolese researcher on political and security issues, as a defendant in the case, saying that the grounds for the charges against him appear to be a photograph of him and Christian Malenga that was taken in 2016. Okay. On August 27th, the death penalty was requested against 50 defendants, including the 3 Americans. Okay. The public prosecutor also asked the court to confiscate all objects used in the commission of the offenses for the benefits of the Congolese state. However, prosecutors spared one defendant who was suffering from psychological problems. The court issued its verdict on September 13th and sentenced 37 defendants to death, including Marcel Malenga, Zalman Poulon, Thompson Wando, a British national of Congolese origin, and a Canadian national of Congolese origin. The remaining 14 defendants were acquitted. Okay, the convicted were also ordered to pay more than 145 billion Congolese francs, $50 million in damages to the Congolese state. An appeal against the decision was filed by lawyers representing the 3 Americans on September 17th. Okay. In February 2025, Jean-Jacques Wando was repatriated to Belgium on medical grounds. On April 1st, 2025, President Tshisekedi commuted the death sentences of Marcel Malenga, Zalman Poulon, and Thompson to life imprisonment. On April 9th, the 3 were returned to the U.S. Okay. The 3 were returned to the U.S. to serve out their sentences. On April 10th, the 3 were charged by the U.S. Department of Justice with conspiring to provide weapons, explosives, and other supports to a rebel army aimed at overthrowing a foreign government. A 4th person, Joseph Peter Moesser, was also charged with providing explosives, training, and instructions at his residence in Utah, as well as contributing weapons. Okay. 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 And so these guys, they got sentenced to death, you know. And okay, so I got the picture from left, Benjamin Zalman, Poulon, Marcel Malenga, and Taylor Thompson, American citizen, suspected with a group of about 50 other people, okay, to be involved in an attempted coup in the DRC. Wait for the verdict during their trial in Kinshasa on September 13, 2024. Okay. So, yeah, Marcel Malenga, he went in with his dad, to do this coup, and they attacked the president and the economic minister. And of course, they were thwarted by security forces, captured, and then put on trial and sentenced. And my whole thing is this: is why, I don't know, man. It just seems like a crazy situation to try to get yourself involved in. And these guys got themselves involved in this thing, and they got themselves involved in this thing, and I guess they were in over their head, and they ended up, of course, the coup failed, and the coup failed, and they got captured and sentenced. Now, the gentleman, Zalman Poulon, who was a business associate of Christian, he was in with them, and I believe he was a U.S. citizen, and he was trying to, I guess he wanted to get involved with the mining, some kind of mining contract or something like that, and and the whole thing just fell off. And but if you want to do a coup, right? And in an African country, and I've never got involved with anything in African politics or anything like that. But my whole thing is, if they wanted to do this, I mean, you would think they would at least try to portray themselves like they were trying to improve the country, or something, or that they wanted to do something to help the citizens, or liberate the citizens or something like that. Seems like this dude, he just went in and it was all ego, and he had problems with the president and stuff. He didn't like the president or whatever, but it seemed like it was all ego, and he just wanted to get in there and get into power. That's what it looked like to me. And that's what looks like his main motivation was. Um, okay, it was just to get into power. Didn't really seem like, or at least I haven't seen yet what his agenda was. But I'll continue reading. This is from Al Jazeera. Okay, DR Congo military court sentences 37 to death in coup trial. Okay, a military court in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, has sentenced to death 37 people, including 3 United States citizens, on charges of taking part in a failed coup in May. The court pronounces the harshest sentence: the death penalty for criminal association, the death penalty for attack, the death penalty for terrorism. The court's president, Freddie Humi, said in a verdict read on live television on Friday. Okay. The defendants, who also included a Briton, Belgian, and Canadian, have 5 days to appeal the verdict. 14 people were acquitted in the trial, which opened in June. Okay. Richard Bondo, the lawyer who defended the 6 foreigners, told the Associated Press news agency he disputed whether the death penalty had currently be imposed in the DRC despite its reinstatement this year, and said his clients had inadequate interpreters during the investigation of the case. We will challenge this decision on appeal, Bonde said. Okay. At the time of the attempted coup, military officials said armed men had briefly occupied an office of the presidency in the capital, Kinshasa on May 19th. Their leader, U.S.-based Congolese politician Christian Malenga, was killed by security forces, and 2 security guards were also killed in the failed takeover. Okay. Malenga, who styled himself president of New Zaire, was a wealthy businessman, politician, and one-time military captain in the Congolese army. He contested parliamentary elections in 2011, but was arrested and detained for several weeks under former President Joseph Kabila. Upon his release, Malenga went to the U.S., where he founded the opposition United Congolese Party. Over the years, he campaigned for religious freedom in Africa and led anti-corruption training initiatives for young Africans in Europe. President Felix Tshisekedi was sworn in a second term in January after elections that were marred by logistical issues, irregularities, and violence. Okay. Western and Central Africa have experienced a series of coups over the past few years. Human Rights Watch had called on Congolese authorities to ensure the trial met international standards. Congo and the region have a legacy of coups and attempted coups. Louis Mudge, Central Africa director of Human Rights Watch, said shortly after the failed coup, the Congolese government needs to treat this crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate its commitment to human rights and the rule of law. Malenga's son, Marcel Malenga, was sentenced to death on Friday, along with Taylor Thompson, who played high school football with him in Utah, and Benjamin Zalman Poulon, a business associate of the late Elder Malenga. Okay. Marcel Malenga had previously told the court that his father had threatened to kill him unless he participated. He also told the court it was his first time visiting DRC at the invitation of his father, whom he hadn't seen in years. Okay. Another defendant sentenced on Friday is a Belgian military expert. Okay. A majority of them, they came from the diaspora. Al Jazeera's Alain Khani said, reporting from Goma in the eastern DRC, this coup was not organized by the military of the country or police officers here in the country. Okay. The DRC lifted a moratorium on the death penalty in March, citing treachery and espionage and recurring armed conflicts as the reason. Okay. 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 And then we got another. Um, I would play this, but you know, the I'm not gonna be able to show it. You know, but okay. Um, I'll play the audio. Hold on. This is an executions video, raises new question over DR Congo coup attempt. Okay. Okay, hold on. Let me look at this.
Zaire oye! Zaire oye! Zaire oye! The real men who walk with me stood up and said enough with this broad regime, a dictatorship, a regime that has sucked our blood. The Pillsbury state enough. I go by the name of Christian Malanga.
Okay, so I watched it. Okay, so yeah, the failed coup attempt in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And sometimes I get confused between the DRC and then the Congo itself. There's you got the DRC and then you have Republic of the Congo, then you have the DRC. You know, but there's two of them. There's Republic of the Congo and then Democratic Republic of the Congo. Okay. So sometimes I get confused between those two, but yeah, now me personally, it looks like a very unwise decision to me. This is like something very unwise that they did, and I think they thought that they were gonna get away with it. You know, I think they thought that what it was they thought that they were gonna get away with it. But of course they didn't. You know, and they were held accountable. But I just don't think this is the smart way to do business in Africa. Like the coups and stuff, and it seems like these African countries have gotten much better over the years at ruling out coups, and their intelligence network seems like they're better. It seems like they're better at finding out about them and realizing when they're gonna happen and when they're gonna go down, and they find out about him. They realize what's gonna go down and when it's gonna go down, and you know they defend against it and they thwart it, and that's what happened in this case. And it looks like the guy Christian Malanga, he just, I don't know, something about and I watched a little video of him, and he just kind of seemed, I don't know, man. It looked like to me like the guy seemed delusional, and he was up there talking about, we're ending this regime, this dictatorship, this corrupt regime, or whatever. And I know he had a lot of Westerners with him that he was doing business with, that and he was gonna hook them up. Like once he got into power, he was gonna hook them up. He was gonna give them mining contracts and all of that type of stuff. And I think historically this is how business was done in Africa. When you have these coups and stuff, these people who are in charge of these coups, they'll go and they'll get in cahoots with people, in the West and stuff, and they'll have these people in the West helping them and being like their ally in the whole thing, and they'll promise them favors and stuff like that, and they'll promise them they're going to give them this and give them that, and that type of stuff, and in exchange for I guess in exchange for cooperation and stuff like that. Um, in exchange for cooperation, in exchange for, looks like the guy that was out in Utah, he was providing like I guess military training to the assailants and stuff, to these guys. So this guy is Christian Malanga. Um he was highly in bed with the West. I know that for a fact. He was in bed with the West a lot. He had business associates and stuff involved with him. All right, you know, and my whole thing is this: is that of course, looking in hindsight, what they did was very unwise. Okay, it was unwise. You know what I mean? It wasn't well thought out, and it ultimately backfired. Okay, but see, the thing with like African coups and stuff is it's either you either win and you gain everything and you take over the country, or you lose and a lot of times when you lose, you die pretty much. They catch you, they're gonna put you on trial, they're gonna execute you. Um, Now they were scheduled. Now, I heard that there were other Congolese that were involved that were trying to help them. Some of them that got caught have already been executed. Okay, but I know Christian Malenga's son and his little accomplices that went to high school with them, and the white guy that wanted to get in on the mining and shit like that. Um, they were apprehended. They were supposed to be executed, but because of the nature of the way the U.S. government works, the U.S. government had them brought back to the U.S. to serve terms of. And what happened was the Congolese government, the president, he commuted their sentence to life in prison, and then once they got the life in prison, they were then extradited back to the United States to serve that life in prison sentence. So pretty much they in federal prison now, and it's that's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? Now you done got caught up in this, and now you spending the rest of your life locked away in a federal prison for trying to overthrow the charges that the U.S. gave them were trying to overthrow a foreign government. That was the charge that they received, and the U.S. is gonna go ahead and uphold their life sentence, conviction. So they just gonna spend the rest of their lives in federal prison now. And I think that this guy, this Christian Malanga, I think he had this idea in his head that somehow the U.S. government was going to support him. I know some of the people that was with him had American arm patches on their uniforms, which that blows my mind. You doing a coup in Africa, but you got an American arm patch on your uniform. You know what I mean? On your uniform, you know, yeah, you know. So that's weird, and they tried to run up in there. They tried to take over the government, and it failed. And, I feel like it was, now, some people say, now, what would he have done had he gotten into power? So a lot of people say he would have done the same stuff. He would have been just as corrupt, as the current government. But this dude went and set up a whole government in exile to try to carry this thing out. He had a whole government in exile to try to carry this thing out. And it all failed. Now, in the end, what could have possessed this dude? Was it ego? Was it arrogance? Well, what could have possessed this dude to pull this stunt? Was it really just ego? Did he feel like it was his turn, it was his turn to have power, so he felt he was going to go take the power himself? You know, is that what it was, or in that whole type of thing, you know? But I feel like he targeted the capital, he targeted the economic minister and the presidential palace and stuff, and I think that he stormed the presidential palace, but when he went after the economic minister, that's where he had the most resistance at. And that's when he started taking the casualties. And then they came to arrest him at the presidential palace, and then he was killed trying to resist arrest, or as what they say. You know, but I don't feel sorry for these guys because the whole thing was a loser move. It's not something I would have done. The whole thing just kind of looks like a kind of a loser move that they kind of made, and that whole type of thing. You know, and it feels like you know it just you just tell it was not well thought out. Like I can just look at this thing and say it wasn't well thought out. Um, you would think that he would have tried at least to get more of the security forces on his side, because it seems like as soon as this thing popped off, the security forces were on. They were pretty well disciplined. They were on this thing from the get go, from jump. They were on this thing. You know what I mean? They were on this thing from jump. And as far as this guy's movements and where he was, they knew exactly how to triangulate on his position and come and get this dude and thwart this whole plan. But it was highly dangerous, and you would think, why would this man put his only son's life at risk like this? Why would you do this to your son, man? If you're gonna go try to take over the country or whatever, okay, cool. Go do it, but don't put your son. Your son is in federal prison now for the rest of his life now. You just destroyed your son's future. He don't even have a future anymore. Unless they let him out at like 80 or something for the last 2-3 years of his life, or. But he don't even have a. It's just crazy to me. Your son's whole future is gone now. Because of this failed coup. And we've seen these coups in Africa, all throughout the years. A lot of times it's like military leaders and stuff who try to do these things, who try to and that type of stuff. A lot of times, many times it's military leaders who try for whatever reason, they try to, you know, pull this type of stuff. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. And sometimes it is successful, and the military leader takes over the country for a period of time. I know that Nigeria, especially in the 70s and 80s, they had a lot of coups in Nigeria in the 70s and 80s. You know, that's documented fact. And most of those times, it was military leaders that were taking over the country. And then that one would get kicked out, and another one would come, and he would get kicked out, and and that's how these coups go. I know Idi Amin took over Uganda, I believe, in the 70s as well. I believe I'm gonna have to do a video on Idi Amin's reign, but I know Idi Amin took over Uganda, you know, in the 1970s, and he had a coup, but it was successful though. He had a successful coup, and he was able to take over the country for a number of years. Okay. I know Samuel Doe had a coup in the 80s, the early 1980s. He took over Liberia, but that that was a disaster because the standard of living in Liberia went way down after he took over. It was a mess. And then he was overthrown, I believe, 9 years later, and then he was captured and tortured and killed in a very brutal manner. And his torture video is actually on YouTube. It's hard to watch. It's a brutal thing. But it's on YouTube. I'm surprised YouTube has let that be up for so many years. But there's a disclaimer on it. When you watch it, it'll say, warning, the video was graphic. There's a disclaimer on it. They wouldn't put a disclaimer on it, but they left the video up. YouTube has allowed that video to be up all these years. And they'll flag people for other stuff, but they let that be up there. So that's that in and of itself is weird. You know. You know. You know. But I'm not a big fan of coups. I don't like coups. I think Africa needs to move on from that. You know what I mean? I think Africa needs to outgrow that. They need to get to a point where they're having, fair elections, and they're putting people in power who are going to put the country and stuff first. But I know some countries like Nigeria are in a lot of trouble because they have these super rich leaders, but then the country itself is like stagnating and just having all these problems, But they got these rich ass, presidents and government officials and stuff, but then the country itself is stagnated, with their currency and then all of that, you know, but it's just crazy to me. But Nigeria in and of itself is a whole another thing that I'm gonna have to go and explore and talk about. You know what I mean? Nigeria itself is a whole nother story. It's a whole nother thing. Okay, but like I said, the Congolese that helped them to try to take over this government, a lot of them have already been executed, and they must feel. I know they must feel real bad. That they signed on to this plan. Who knows what this man Christian Malenga promised them? Okay, who knows what this man promised them? and they got caught up, arrested. Now you about to be executed. You know, so you just, you gambled and lost. And in that case, you lose your, you're losing your life behind it. So there was a stiff consequence for losing. You know, and that whole type of thing. And what have you. Like I said, the whole coup era that needs to be over. That needs to be over with. It really does. It needs to be over with. Africa deserves better. It does. Africa deserves better than this. And they're always, it's like they never care who they hurt. Like they don't care how many women and children get hurt. A lot of times they're using like child soldiers in these wars and stuff instead of having these boys getting educated or getting trades and stuff so they can help the economy grow. You giving them a gun, you giving them a grenade and telling them to go kill people, and it's, yeah, you know, and that whole type of thing. And people lose their life. There was a movie years ago that came out on Netflix. I forgot what it was called, but it was about this warlord in Africa, you know, and he was running around doing crazy stuff, trying to do a coup and trying to. But there was a lot of weird dynamics in that film, though. There are a lot of things that were problematic with that film. You know, There's a lot of problems with it. Yeah, and that type of stuff is what has destroyed Africa. Made it harder for to have economic growth, made it harder to have investment, and that type of stuff. you know, you know, you know, and that whole type of thing. And then you got to deal with all the asylum, all the people who get displaced by this stuff, and they have to ask for political asylum and stuff in the West. So you just end up getting more Africans who end up coming to the West and that kind of thing. And it's just, it just leads to the continued like depopulation of Africa. You get all these people that feel like they got to always come to the West all the time instead of staying in Africa and building. They should be staying in Africa and building Africa up, but instead you get a lot of these people who end up, come. They have to come out to the West, or they feel like that's what they have to do, and it backs up the immigration system. Like you had all these people trying to come over here in the Biden administration, all these people from all over the world. You have a lot of Africans. You had Haitians and stuff coming over because Haiti had a coup about 5, 6 years ago. And they had hired Colombian mercenaries to kill the Haitian president. You know, and Haiti had a whole coup and everything. And they had Colombian mercenaries out there helping out with it, and that type of thing, and that whole thing was a mess. Like that coup destroyed Haiti. Haiti is ran by gangs now. It's ran by you know God knows who. I mean, I know Kenya sent armed police officers out there, but I don't know if that's really doing anything. The whole place is ran by warlords and stuff now. You know, and that's just what it is. You know, you know, you know, and it's to a point where they got they had this one dude they called Barbecue that was going around supposedly massacring people and all this type of stuff. And supposedly, this is what according to the State Department. So supposedly, you know, and he was running around doing his thing, you know, and he remains to be an active figure. Okay, but Haiti is just in lawlessness now, and it's all because of that coup that they had. You know what I mean? And that whole type of thing. Haiti could have been doing good. A lot of people say Haiti was doing really well prior to the earthquake that they had in 2011. Prior to the earthquake and then the coup that they had, Haiti has just gone downhill. It's just gone downhill. And who knows when Haiti will become stable again. You know. So it looked like Haiti is just in a mess. It just like the whole place is just in a mess, man. You know. And that's how I feel about it. And it's a shame. Haiti could be a successful country if they really developed their economy, if they develop markets. You could grow a lot of rice in Haiti. In Haiti, you could grow so much rice. You'll be able to produce enough rice in Haiti to actually feed the whole world if they went down that path. Just in Haiti alone, you'll be able to grow enough rice. Yeah. But it has been unfortunate that, Haiti has had all these recent setbacks that have stopped them from developing. It's extremely unfortunate. I mean, extremely unfortunate. I mean, very unfortunate. I mean, very, very unfortunate that this has happened to Haiti. You know, but hopefully Haiti be able to get their stuff back together soon, and hopefully, we can get everything back together. But I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off for this video. Let me know what y'all think. Please let me know what your feedback is. Um, get the likes up. If you like the channel, please help us build the channel up. But for right now, peace.